The music.
The tourists.
Freedom of speech.
The boats.
The bridle path.
Think you know Manchester? Think again. Visit manchester.com sponsors I Love Manchester.
Welcome to I Love Manchester, our guide to the successes and secrets of our city. In many areas of Manchester you'll find remnants of its rich heritage, whether it's medieval, Victorian or something a little older. Well, today I've come to Castlefield in Manchester city centre, where you can see what Manchester may have looked like in Roman times.
Castlefield, right, is like an oasis in Manchester, I find. Because if you walk to it, it's a good place to go drinking in the day.
Been to Castlefield, been to the Roman fort. I went to a pub that I think is on, people spill out from it to drink on the Roman fort bit.
You've got all the chaos of the city centre, and then just out of there, you've got a little bit of a divider with the canal. And then you've got Castlefield, and it's just a bit more chilled out.
I think it's definitely sort of the cool part of the city, isn't it? Without sort of trying to be too cool. And there's been loads of apartments gone up in recent times, and people just kind of really want to live here.
The Roman Empire was one of the largest empires of the ancient world. It stretched from Scotland to the Sahara Desert, from Spain in the west to Iraq in the east. It was created and formed by one of the most efficient organisations the world has ever known, the Roman army. It was in 79 AD that the Roman army came here and built a Roman fort from which a town developed around it. And so the Romans founded Mamucium, referred to today as Manchester. So Norman, this is what Roman Manchester would have looked like.
Well, it's changed a little bit since Roman times, I have to say, but back in the 1980s we did actually reconstruct some of the Roman features that we'd found in excavations in previous years, and you're actually walking on what would have been the main Roman road coming out of the North Gate. So behind you we have the reconstruction of the North Gate as we think it may have looked in 200 AD. You can also see behind you and behind me we've reconstructed two typical ditches that would have defended the entrance to the fort.
So the Romans marched into the northwest of England. Why did they choose Castlefield?
Well, it's difficult to tell today, but we're actually in quite a good strategic position here. We're on high ground over the confluence of the rivers Medlock and the River Irwell. The modern Deansgate is certainly the line of a Roman road, and it would have probably crossed the Medlock by a ford. But on this side, as we go down the Roman road coming out of North Gate, we come into the civilian settlement. This was called the Vicus. Nearly every Roman fort in Britain attracted civilians, artisans, traders, because you had the soldiers being paid regular wages. So where were they going to spend their money? Well, they'd just walk out the gateway and you've got market stalls. You'd have an inn. The soldiers would have either brought wives with them, or they would have married into local tribes, and the civilian settlement built up in Manchester. And we think at its peak, probably around 200 AD, could have been as many as 2,000 people living in Manchester.
So it's quite a cosmopolitan place.
It was, and a great mix of nationalities from all over the Roman Empire, and not much different to today, really.
Unfortunately for our early Roman Mancunians, the Romans withdrew from Britain and the fort was finally abandoned in 410 AD. Over the centuries, the site became overgrown, and by the Middle Ages it was known locally as Castle in the Field, which was later shortened to what it is known today, Castlefield.
The real big change was the Duke of Bridgewater building his canal terminus on the River Medlock. Till then it had been a green area with some stone ruins from the Roman fort, Castle in the Field. But in the 1760s all that changed, with warehouses being built around the canal, and later railways coming in, and you see that really well if we look across to the Roman wall. A great juxtaposition between the Roman wall and the Victorian cast iron railway viaduct in the background. It just sums up Castlefield for me.
So with the start of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century meant that wasn't the end of Castlefield. In 1765 the Bridgewater Canal was opened here, the first canal built in Britain. Commissioned by the 3rd Duke of Bridgewater so coal could be ferried from his mines in Worsley to the industrial areas of Manchester. It was a forerunner in canal systems, being the first in the UK, being built independently with no locks, so goods could be transported a lot quicker. This canal was instrumental in the early prosperity and growth of Manchester. And it's not a bad way to spend a day sightseeing either. Dave, this is the way to live the life on the water.
It certainly is.
So where have you come from today?
We've followed the canal down from its home in Worsley today.
Worsley's quite significant, isn't it, about the history of canals in Manchester?
Yeah, Worsley's a really important place for the nation actually, because that's where the canal system started. Sir Francis Egerton, the 3rd Duke, built the canal to take his coal into Manchester here. And that really was the start of canal mania, and the canal spread from there right around the country. It became the lifeblood of the Industrial Revolution, of course.
And it was the first canal to be built in Britain, wasn't it, the Bridgewater Canal?
Yeah, the real buffs would argue that. They'd say the Sankey was the first man-made canal, but that followed a natural course, whereas this was completely independent of any other rivers, so that was the first actual man-made canal entirely.
So when industry declined and the canal wasn't being used to transport coal anymore, what happened to them?
Well, this actual canal itself finished about 1974. The last boats to use this canal were grain boats, which used to go to Kellogg's. And many other canals as well. Once the trade stopped, they were in danger of being filled in and lost completely. In fact, Castlefield here until the 80s, all the arms that you can see were all filled in completely. And this area was completely derelict. So it was only when they developed it that it made it to what you see today.
So how long have you been working on the canals for?
Probably about 12 years altogether. I've owned this boat for the last 3 years and made my hobby really, which it was my living, and I gave up a job with a large corporation that I worked with for 32 years and took a gamble and bought the boat.
You glad you made the decision?
Well, it was stressful.
Yeah, it looks really stressful.
No, definitely made the right decision.
And now, though, you offer narrowboat trips throughout the summer.
Yeah, we do public trips for members of the public. They can just turn up and pay on board. It's more on the heritage line rather than a booze cruise type thing. You know. People want to enjoy the canal. Yeah,
it's not for boozing, the canals, is it?
No, definitely not. Especially not on a narrowboat like this one. You can see how it rocks.
But as well, I have heard that you can go and watch the match, Man United, Old Trafford.
Yes, you can. There's actually 2 boats go from here to Old Trafford. This one goes every home game. And a colleague of mine's restaurant boat, the LS Lowry, takes his group of people down to the game every home game, yeah.
So where are you off to now?
We're going to tootle back to Worsley.
Right, well I'll help you untie the boat then, I think.
By all means.
There we go, you're free to go.
Thank you very much, see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, you may not have your own barge to sleep on, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem around Castlefield, with some of the finest and most economical places to stay in just a stone's throw away of the canal. If you're travelling around the UK on a budget, one of the best places to stay in Manchester is the YHA, one of the more recently renovated in the chain here. It's spacious, clean and has great facilities. Equipped with communal TV rooms and a kitchen if you want to cook yourself, or alternatively a meal in the restaurant will cost you as little as a £5. And the people staying here tell me they also do a fantastic breakfast.
I've been here 5 days. I love it here. It's just so easygoing, and get breakfast in the morning, big breakfast. That's wicked.
I love it. The nightlife's so good. So much better than Perth. And it's good because it's only about 10 minutes walk into the city. And
we just go outside and have drinks outside in the water, so that's cool.
They're really friendly. Like, you can come home at any night, any time of the night. They just let you in. You just press the buzzer and they clean your bedroom for you.
And rooms, we've got nice views as well, so that's cool.
I'd say it's value for money, definitely.
Well, we get backpackers from all over the world, school parties, groups, families, people out on town, lots of facilities. People can use this 24 hours a day. It's more like a hotel these days, really, but it's still very cheap. And you get to meet lots of people, so you're not locked away in a bedroom, like in bed and breakfast. You've got a bar, games room, TV lounge, so there's plenty for people to do when they're here. Lots of information, very friendly and helpful staff. Just everything that everybody needs when they're travelling.
But if money is no option, then why not splash out on a night here at the Great John Street Hotel for some pure indulgence? This boutique hotel was once a Victorian school. It holds 30 suites and is where all the celebrities staying in Manchester want to come. Think New York loft mixed with vintage chic. All suites are dressed with fine Egyptian linen and even these fantastic hand-carved beds, but not only that. Every suite is split on 2 levels, and upstairs you'll find not 1 but 2 roll-top baths, so I suppose you could sit to your heart's content here and chat to your partner or your friend in the other bath. But if you fancy a dip in true 5-star style, then you can't go wrong with a dip in the hot tub on the roof terrace. You just don't get better than this. Castlefield may have been the hub of canal systems that propelled Manchester forward in the Industrial Revolution, but industrialists still found that method of transporting goods too slow. So they decided on a faster, more efficient mode of transport, trains. In the late 19th century, ambitious railway companies built the viaducts in Castlefield to bring trains into the city, and there is one tourist attraction that was at the very heart of it.
I've been there many times. I've been to the Manchester Museum, Science Industry, many times.
We used to either go there, or we used to go to Alton Towers. Alton Towers for fun, Science Museum for learning. But it was great because it's one of those places where, when you're about 3.5 foot high, big wheels, loads of rusty machinery.
It's just one of those places where you can spend hours and hours looking at all the different things in there and not come away having repeated yourself, really.
But it's fantastic fun for kids. There's an interactive section in the museum that kids are fascinated by as well. And what that museum has done is what every single museum should do, and actually what every school should be doing, is taking the concept of science in all its forms and making it real for kids.
Pauline, not many people realise that the Museum of Science and Industry is actually built on a very, very historic site.
Yes, that's right. We occupy the buildings of Liverpool Road Station, which was the Manchester terminus of Liverpool and Manchester Railway, built in 1830, and that was the world's first purpose-built passenger and goods station. So it was what really laid the foundation for the modern mainline railway network.
And the oldest surviving passenger railway station in the world now.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a site of international importance. Both of the original railway stations became later just goods stations, but it's the Manchester station that's survived more or less intact.
So the opening day back in 1830, I suppose, was a big revelation for everybody. So what was the occasion like?
The actual official opening day was just for guests, for invited guests, of whom the chief was the Prime Minister, the Duke of Wellington, who unfortunately wasn't very popular in Manchester at the time and was greeted by a crowd of noisy protesters. And because there had been an accident on the way as well, he actually didn't join in the festivities at this end where there was a meal laid on for guests. He stayed in his carriage.
The great thing I always remember about this museum coming as a child are these very impressive steam locomotives.
Yes, I don't know whether you quite remember this one. This is actually a reproduction of a locomotive called Planet, which was a successor to Rocket. And it was Rocket, the locomotive built by the Stephensons, that won the Rainhill Trials. The Rainhill Trials was a really important event in the history of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway because it was what established that steam locomotion was reliable and viable for the railway. And Rocket, which was the winning locomotive designed by the Stephensons, then really kind of was the basis of the next generation of locomotives.
And can visitors come and get inside the carriages on the locomotives, and especially children, because they love that kind of thing?
Well, in this case, yes, because that's why we have a reproduction locomotive. Obviously, with the original locomotives, we have to be very careful about them. We don't want to damage them by using them. But because this one's been specially built for us, this is the one that we use at weekends over the summer months to give people steam rides at weekends. So you can actually experience the 1830s rail travel experience.
I know there's nothing quite like the steam locomotives, is there, compared to modern day trains, really?
I think they're a lot more atmospheric, but then on the other hand, it has to be said that some of the passengers in 1830 didn't appreciate it because the smoke and the cinders, they would fly backwards, and because originally the carriages weren't fully enclosed, women would complain about the fact that their dresses got dirty and in some cases got burned.
I wouldn't have liked that, I have to say.
And if you were to bring somebody from the States or somebody from Europe over, and on your way past said, and by the way, that's the place where the first passenger railway station in the whole world was, they would stop and want to go in and have a look, quite rightly.
It was full of those things, that, like big wheels, and you press a button to interact. It was like, it didn't really do a lot. It was just like a really slow wheel going round. And you'd press it, and then a light would come on, you'd press that. And then you'd make it find another button, so you'd all go running off there.
So Manchester was well known for its breakthroughs in railways and canal systems, but here you can also see the breakthroughs in science that Manchester's also contributed to.
That's right, we're in the Manchester Science Gallery, which is where we talk about 200 years of scientific endeavour in Manchester. So at the moment we're standing in the Science Today section, where we look at modern developments in science that are happening in universities and industry in Manchester, so that people understand that important discoveries are still being made in Manchester today.
So who were the major scientists in Manchester then? 4
featured scientists in the gallery are John Dawson, who was a Quaker born in Cumbria and ended up in Manchester, where he did his important scientific work. The second is James Jewell, son of a Salford brewer, and his work was on energy and the different forms it takes. Third one is Ernest Rutherford, born in New Zealand, but then he came to Manchester University, where he did research resulting in the splitting of the atom. And finally, Sir Bernard Lovell, the one who's still alive, who has his main work has been at the Jodrell Browne Radio Telescope in Cheshire.
And I can see trainers just going by the side of your head. What's that all about?
Well, the story there isn't actually the trainers, it's the socks inside the trainers. And one of the more or less 10 discoveries that we feature is about the development of odourless socks. What a blessing that would be.
Definitely, I know a few people that could do with those, actually.
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah, that won't be long off, will it?
No,
the development. By the 1970s, this area was decaying rapidly. Central Station and the Great Northern Warehouse closed in 1969. Many of the canal arms had been filled in, and the remaining industry was poor and unsightly, with concrete depots and scrapyards. At the same time, however, Castlefield was being rediscovered. In the early 1970s, excavations uncovered part of the site of the Roman fort, and local groups campaigned for the preservation of the site. It was only in the 1980s, however, that the tide turned and regeneration began to change things. In 1979, Castlefield was declared a conservation area, and in 1982 it became Britain's first urban heritage park. Property developer Jim Ramsbottom was a key figure in the redevelopment here. Jim, you are responsible for bringing Castlefield the glorious facelift, and I've heard people talk about you as the private face of Castlefield.
That's an exaggeration, really, like everything. I mean, the only thing that I did 20 years ago, it wasn't terribly fashionable then, was to actually understand that there were buildings and there was infrastructure in these old areas that were worth saving. I had a betting shop round the corner, you know. And whenever I had a bad day, I used to walk round Castlefield Basin. Always gave me the impression of being away from everything, which it was, even though you could see the town hall clock, because my interest was really in waterways and local history. And the buildings around here are not of any great architectural significance, but they're all significant historically, and especially in terms of what Manchester stood for in the Industrial Revolution and the post-Industrial Revolution. And there was a chance of changing the use of the buildings and bringing them back to life again. I used to call this the viaducts here, the Berlin Wall. That prevented the basin from having visibility. Nobody came here. And that meant that some of the buildings and some of the infrastructure had not been buried under 6 feet of concrete. And what I liked about the area in terms of feel was that you could come in here, even when it was a derelict mess, and you could feel as though you're 20, 25 miles outside the city centre, but you could see the town hall clock. It was really great. So the space has become even more important. And that's the reason why you get people thronging around over there, because they can come here, sit by the canal, they've not got cars flying by them, they can exploit this feeling that you could be 20 miles outside of town.
It's a real summer place though, isn't it?
It is.
In the wintertime, Castlefield gets really, really quiet and serene.
Even the ducks move out.
Duke's 92 is a good place. I enjoy it in there. Last time I went down to Castlefield for the snowboarding festival as well. That was great. I had backstage passes. Met all these snowboard dudes.
Where men once worked long hours loading and unloading barges full of coal and potatoes, today the young and affluent sit in the sunshine sipping pints and cocktails.
But I'd opened a pub on the River Irwell to, as it were, as a regeneration tool, to, as it were, introduce people to the river. They cross over 10 times a week and didn't even know which way it went. And this was a similar strategy on my part, even when it was, say, full of scrapyards and old garages and stuff, was to actually open a pub here to give people a reason to come down. Because those are the old stables that serviced Merchant's Warehouse over there. And the name, of course, Duke's 92, because we opened, I think, in 91, and everybody said, it's going to be out of date next year.
And
it's
not
it's nothing to do with the date, it's to do with this lock where you can see the number 92 on it.
Duke's 92 lock, which is the bottom of the Rochdale Canal, but should have really been called number 1.
Correct.
Yes.
How did you know that? Very good. Exactly, it was built by a Yorkshireman.
Yeah.
And the bottom lock's always named the first, and then they're numbered up to the summit, which is around Middleborough. But because he was a Yorkshireman, he wouldn't have number 1 in Lancashire. You're quite right. So Duke's 92 is actually called after the lock.
It wouldn't have had the same ring, Duke's 1, would it? Really?
I never thought about that.
Castlefield has so many bars and restaurants to dine at, from the traditional gastro pub at the Ox on Liverpool Road to Akbar's Indian restaurant, or dance the day and night away at the Deeper Cushion Music Festival here in the summer. But there are places to eat here that will keep you both entertained and your mouth watering. If you enjoy your sushi and your noodles, this is one of Manchester's biggest and newest Japanese restaurants. It's called the Sapporo Teppanyaki, and what's so impressive about it is the chefs actually come to your table and prepare your food right in front of you. But it can get very heated. Ooh. Thanks very much. Thank you. Sarah, this isn't a restaurant, it's more like a theatre show.
It is. It's a unique experience to come and watch your meal being prepared in front of you. It's a very lively environment as well, so it's a nice, good, fun night out.
It's a teppanyaki restaurant. What does teppanyaki mean?
Teppanyaki is simply cooking your meal in front of you at the table. The grill that you see here is the teppan grill, literally. So it's teppanyaki is just a style of cooking your meal in front of you.
Do you get many tourists coming in and many Japanese coming in?
We do. We get quite a nice mix. We get a lot of business people that come out for events and that sort of thing. It's a nice way to entertain clients. We get a lot of tourists from the local hotels and residents as well, and local people from Manchester that have just been craving something new like this.
And the decor in here is really minimal but very, very classy. It's a really elegant restaurant.
Yes, it is. It's open air concept, so everyone can see what's going on and very free to move around.
And there's lots of interesting dishes. I mean, this absolutely smells amazing. Can't wait to eat it. What can people expect to see on the menu?
Well, we have, for starters and that sort of thing, sushi. There's very high quality, very, very fresh fish that we can prepare for you. So we've got a selection here of sushi, of salmon, tuna, classic California roll. There we have our Manchester roll, which is smoked swordfish, Lancashire cheese, crab meat and carrot rolled in flying fish roe. So that's specific for Manchester, special for Manchester.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Very, very healthy, isn't it?
Quite a healthy option for anybody who likes fresh fish, fresh food. And traditional Japanese cuisine is traditionally very healthy.
So you're going to join me for some food now?
I will. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
Got to say, the Romans were very well known for their great banquets, but I don't think they'd have quite matched this one.
Nothing like this, no.
It's a pregnant.
Yes. You just cracked your egg.
2, 3, let's go.
What do I do?
Yeah, chew on your...
I've cracked the egg.
I think this is not good.
I knew I'd do that.
Yes. Yeah, okay,
we can have
you.
fried egg and potato. Right, you've had enough of me now, haven't you? Okay.
Oh, I'd love to go there.
Places to go with JMPTE. Sponsors I Love Manchester.